What's up, guys? Welcome back to another midweek edition of the Just Mets podcast brought to you by the Believe Podcast Network. I'm your host, Rich MacLeod, doing this week's midweek show. And coming at you on the Mets off day after their series in Seattle. Honestly, feel like we're not even going to really talk too much about this series. The Mets lose 2 out of 3. They lose the first 2 games pretty underwhelmingly. I know that game 1 did go into extra innings, like the Mets, 500th extra inning game of the season. They lead the majors in extra inning games already. I think they're on pace right now for over 30, which would break the record by about 2 or 3 games. Hopefully, for their sake, that kind of slows down at some point. But they lose that game 3-2 on a walk-off. The classic Mets offense situation where can't score with the free runner at second base. Not only that, but they don't even get him to third base in that inning, so couldn't even move him up. And that was with, you had Soto up, you had a few other guys up that you kind of hoped could come through. But the Mets only had, in a game that went to extra innings, which I guess is somewhat impressive, although, not intentionally impressive, is the fact that they just had 2 hits in that entire game. They just both happened to be solo home runs. One of those by Jared Young, of all people, who we'll talk about him in a minute, who, he may very well have merit to steal the first base job at this point. And the other home run was from Marcus Semien. So, the guys that you hope would do something didn't really deliver. They get 2 hits. They wind up losing on a walk-off. Game 2 is not particularly close. They lose 8-3. It wasn't even that close. In that game, they only racked together a couple of hits as well. I think what did they wind up with in that game? 3 hits? 5 hits. So 7 hits over their first 2 games, 5 total runs. Again, just wiping away the good vibes of their little 4-game winning streak and their sweep over the Marlins. And that's why I think me and Andrew on Sunday, when we did this show, were not particularly excited. It felt good. It was better than losing, of course, but ultimately, like, what does it mean to sweep the Marlins, to win 4 games in a row? Because you look at this team, you look at the state of the roster, which is not great right now, but just the way the team has played really since the season started and how last year ended on top of that, why would you think that this team's going to ever string anything together until they actually do it in a meaningful way? And that's not winning 4 games in a row against crappy teams. And it's not even winning 6 out of 7 against the Tigers and the Yankees and 1 game against the Nationals, because every time the Mets have done that this year, and you start to think, you don't even fully buy in. You just start thinking like, well, okay, maybe, there's 4 months left. We have all this time. Baseball's a crazy sport. You just got to sneak in that last wild card spot. Every single time you even start to entertain that thought, what happens? The Mets lose a bunch of games in a row. So they had that winning streak, or that 6 out of 7 streak against those 3 teams I mentioned. What do they do after that? They lose, 7 out of their next 8, including 5 in a row. That was the time that the Marlins swept them. Then they turn around and they win 4 games in a row, and then they lose their first 2 games in Seattle. They do salvage the last game in Seattle with a laugher, a rare blowout win for them. I mean, not only is it rare for them to score runs at all or to win games at all, but it does feel like, and I think Anthony DiComo tweeted this a few days ago, it feels like when the Mets have won games this year, the rare times that they've won games, it's always like these ass-clenching, edge of your seat, like you barely escape. A lot of extra inning games, a lot of games that come down to that last out. A lot of low-scoring games, even when the Mets score a bunch of runs. Those games seem to wind up being close. You had that walk-off against the Marlins last weekend where, 7-7 going into extra innings, if I remember correctly. The Mets won that game 9-7 on the Melendez walk-off. But they actually, have a nice comfortable win on Wednesday last night or yesterday afternoon to finish that series. They win 7-1. Shout out to Freddie Peralta, who I was pretty harsh on in Sunday's show. I got some grief on Twitter and all that I was probably a little overly harsh. I called him a massive disappointment for those that didn't watch the episode or see the clip. I think that was probably a little bit dramatic. I think I was a little frustrated. I do think that he has somewhat been disappointing, but maybe that's just because I built him to be something that maybe he wasn't. But he goes 6 strong innings, lowers his season ERA to 3.38. So, you can't really get mad at that. He does go 6 innings. So I can't make my 5-frame Freddie crack this week. So good for him. I genuinely, there's a lot of people out there who do these podcasts or just, shoot these tweets out into the ether that is the internet that would rather be right than happy. I am not that person. I very much love it when I say something negative and a player or a team or whatever makes me look stupid, because that's what I want. I don't want to be correct in those situations. So good on Freddie Peralta. Carson Bench had a fun game. He stole home in this game. Bo Bichette had his first 4-hit game as a Met. This happened on June 3rd. This is a guy who, came into this season with a career average of almost 300. And it takes till June 3rd to get his first 4-hit game of the year. It's his first 4-hit game since last September with Toronto. He drove in 3 runs. Cool game, cool win, fun, I guess. AJ Ewing gets 3 hits. I'm looking at the box score right now. This week has kind of been chaos with work and the Knicks, who, if you're watching us on YouTube, I'm wearing the hat right now. Knicks in the finals on Wednesday night, up 1-0. So fuck yeah, let's go Knicks. But kind of, Mets have been a little bit on the back burner at this point with 8 games under 500. They're still in last place in the NL East. Doesn't help that they're also playing these games on the West Coast. They're 400th West Coast road trip of the season, although this is their last West Coast road trip of the season. I think the Mets only go out of the Eastern time zone again in September after this weekend. They got one more series in San Diego starting on Friday. Padres just got swept by the Phillies, if you're wondering. So yeah, Mets haven't been playing great, even with that winning streak. They're playing late. A lot of stuff's going on. So I've mostly been catching up on these games the day after, watching the highlights, watching the game replays on SNY or on MLB TV. And there's not, there's just not much to say about this team. I don't know if anybody, watching us on YouTube or Twitter in the comments, if you want to comment, any thoughts that you have on the series, I'm happy to go through those. But I honestly think, I would prefer to just go on talk about one topic for this show. And this will probably be a little bit of a shorter one because I do have an appointment at 9 p.m. tonight that I have to end for. So, but in the next, 15, 20 minutes, participate in the chat, either on Twitter, I'm not calling it X, or on the YouTube. Feel free. I'll read those out. But one of the big things I did want to talk about, and, this is not a takeaway from this series. This has been something you've been feeling as a Met fan for 2 years now, probably. It's just one of those things that continues to get more and more frustrating as time goes on. And I think game 1 of this series, if I think it was game 1, maybe game 2, forgive me if I'm mixing these up, where you got to the point, and we've gotten to this point a few times this year, it really truly felt like the final point of I cannot fucking watch Mark Vientos play baseball for this team ever again. And he had this awful error in that game, which cost them a run. He basically drops a line drive. This is right after Marcus Semien couldn't catch a line drive. The guy who's only on the team for defense, can't make that play. But Mark Vientos, who has largely been the everyday first baseman this year, which, didn't seem like it was the Mets' original plan after the offseason that they had, botches that play. Of course, he's not hitting again either. In that game, he goes, what does Vientos go? And this was the second game, so I'm screwing things up. Vientos goes 0 for 4 at the plate. He strikes out. That game drops him down to a 219 average, a 634 OPS. He commits that error, his fourth of the year. I know errors are not so indicative of defensive play at this point, but like if you're first baseman, you've made 4 errors to this point, like it's definitely not a good thing. And most of the mistakes that Vientos makes at first base are plays you got to make. These are not difficult plays. Brad, I see you in the comments. I'll pull that one up right away. Brad says, I'm so done with Vientos, and I was a supporter of him. I mean, so was I, man. Like, it's the theme. It's going to be the theme of this midweek episode, where it's just the guy. Yeah, he cranks the occasional home run. It's not even like he's hitting 220 with a bunch of home runs, and you're like, okay, he's like not very good, but he's going to hit like 25 plus home runs and hit for a really low average and be kind of frustrating. Like the guy has, what does he have? 7 home runs this year. It's just not enough for how bad he has been otherwise. And it's just been hard to watch. And I joked about it I think on Twitter maybe a week ago. So this is not anything new that's happening here. I think it's just kind of gotten to the point where I think a lot of Mets fans are just officially sick of it, where there's kind of like a cycle of Mark Vientos, right? Where Mets fans are completely done with him. And then he hits like a 750-foot home run in the 4th deck. And you're like, man, okay. Like, there's the power. Like it's still in there. If he could just tap into it, he doesn't have to be what he was a couple years ago. He just has to tap back into that power. So then you start to latch on. Maybe he has like a couple more decent games, a good series, maybe a good week, but usually not even that. And then you slowly start getting more annoyed, and it gets worse, and he cools off, and suddenly he looks like the worst hitter you've ever seen. And then he makes a critical boneheaded mistake, whether it is on the base pass when he runs through a stop sign, which we saw earlier this year, gets thrown out by 5 miles, whether he drops a line drive that costs you a run, whether he throws a ball into left field on a relay throw to second base. Whatever it is like the most boneheaded play you've ever seen, and you throw your hands up in the air and you're like, okay, finally, like this is it. I'm officially done with Mark Vientos. And then right when you say that, so we've reached that point in the cycle yet again, which means on Friday, he's going to do the next thing, which is he's going to hit another one of those 700-foot home runs into the 4th deck, and the cycle will continue. I'm not falling for it anymore. I guess that's the theme of these shows that we've been doing these last few weeks, is just like, I'm not going to get fooled anymore. And I think a lot of us have held on to the promise that we saw for Mark Vientos in 2024 because he was so fucking awesome in 2024. Like, it is such a crazy fall from grace. And I know that season came out of nowhere, but you have to look back on what he did that year, and it seems impossible based on what we have seen this year and last year from this guy 2024 is his age 24 season, the real first full crack, because he barely played. He got very infrequent at bats in 2022. It didn't show very much. 2023 plays a little bit more. He played 65 games. He did not play well. And then 2024, he didn't get the job. That was Brett Beatty's job, and Mark Vientos was down in AAA. Only gets called up because Beatty gets injured, hits a walk-off home run, then gets sent back down to the minors. Of course, he winds up back in the majors a little bit later on because Brett Beatty did not have it that year and lost his job for good. Vientos hits 266, 322. Not the best on base, but that's fine. Slugs 516. He hits 27 home runs with 71 RBIs, an OPS plus of 134. If you're not familiar, 100 is league average, so he's 34% better than a league average hitter. That was good for a 3.1 B WAR that season, 837 OPS in general. And in the playoffs that year, he was even better. Like, he was a fucking beast in the playoffs that year. A huge part of the Mets' run to the NLCS in that OMG year. He hit 327, 362, 636 slugging, 5 home runs in 13 playoff games. He hits 5 home runs, 14 RBIs. Yeah, he struck out 19 times, but with that production, who gives a shit? 998 OPS. He scored 8 runs too. He was awesome. He was clutch. It just felt like every time he came up to the plate, he was a threat to do something impactful. And what has happened since then is honestly stunning. As stunning as Vientos's ascension to near stardom in 2024 has been his absolute downfall in the 2 seasons since, to the point where, like, you could make a very reasonable case that you just DFA him for nothing. At this point, I probably wouldn't. I'd probably hold on to the trade deadline and get literally anything you could get back. Although I think the ship has absolutely sailed on getting something back from him that you will ever remember. Coming off that 2024 season, the Mets certainly could have gotten something real for him, but the Pete Alonso situation was unresolved till late in the offseason, so the Mets had to hold on to Vientos, and by the time they did sign Pete, it's kind of too late to move on from Mark and try to cash in that chip if the Mets were ever even considering doing that. And now here we are, 2 straight seasons where he is a negative WAR player. He has been a negative offensively. Last year, he was 96 OPS plus. So that's 4% worse than league average. This year, it's 78 OPS plus. Again, he's got a 633 OPS, 7 home runs, 26 RBIs in 53 games. And the thing about this is we can be very hyperbolic about this team and about these players. A guy struggles. Oh, he's a massive disappointment, right? Like I said this about Freddie Peralta the other day. I was being a little hyperbolic because I was annoyed on a podcast. Or he's the best, it's the best player ever. It's the worst player ever. Mark Vientos, like I saw some stats the other day that I hadn't realized how bad it had gotten, because Vientos actually got off to a decent start at first base this year in terms of some of the defensive metrics. Again, it was very small sample size, but he was doing a little bit better than you thought. There was a very brief period where he had a better WAR at first base than Pete Alonso. That period is well over. And in fact, Mark Vientos, as of now, 53 games into his season, has a negative 0.6 FWAR. That is the second worst player in Major League Baseball. 0.1 behind Marcelo Zuna, who is a piece of shit and is really old and is absolutely cooked and has been cooked for several years. That is the only player with enough at bats to even talk about for this who is worse than Mark Vientos. So essentially, Mark Vientos is basically the worst player in Major League Baseball in 2026. Not bad, not an inadequate replacement for Pete Alonso, the worst player in baseball. And I've had enough. And he made those comments the other night. I'll see if I can pull those up really quick because, yeah, okay. Here's the other thing. And again, I don't expect the guy to be like, I stink. I can't make it in this league. Like, you're not rooting for these kids to rip themselves apart, but a little accountability, a little self-awareness would just be great. And after their game on Tuesday, their second loss in Seattle, where Vientos had the really bad game where he went 0 for 4. He hit into the big double play. He had that bad error we were talking about. Talks to reporters after the game. He says, quote, I've got to give myself a little bit of props because last month, just a lot of bad luck. The inconsistency is not something that I want. Trying my best to be the best version of myself right now. It's not happening, but I'm working for it for sure. I know that they call you Swaggy V. You cannot be saying this shit. You got to give yourself a little bit of props. You're hitting into bad luck. What? We're supposed to be proud of you because you're trying hard. You're the worst player in Major League Baseball, proven by the statistics. Again, I'm not being hyperbolic here. I'm not going over the top. Statistically speaking, Mark Vientos, and I've said it 5 times now, and I'm going to keep saying it. Mark Vientos is the worst player in baseball. I'm not going to give it to you. You don't got to give it to him. I mean, it is absolutely absurd that he said that. And I'm done. I'm done with Swaggy V. I'm done with Mark Vientos. It is as quickly as he rose, he has crashed down to the earth. And he is not long for this Mets world. And if you want to tell me, the Mets are going to get rid of him and, he's going to suddenly hit a shitload of home runs and then say, I never got the opportunity in New York. I mean, that's definitely something he would say. That's fine. I don't buy it. I don't see any of that in him anymore. He might still have that internal swagger, but it just kind of makes him look like a jackass when 2 years in a row you look like one of the worst players in baseball. And this year, again, that is what he has been. It's been bad. And again, I put a moratorium on talking about Pete Alonso on this podcast. So I'm not going to go into that, but I was fine letting him leave. You just had to replace him adequately. And there were options out there. Wilson Contreras was out there. Christian Walker was out there. Both of them are having fantastic seasons. They've been 2 of the better first basemen in all of baseball this year, offensively and defensively. And you got Jorge Polanco, never played first base, who gets hurt all the time. And guess what? He was bad, and then he got hurt, and we haven't seen him in almost 2 months. And then the backup plan was Mark Vientos, who, say it with me one last time, people, is the worst player in baseball. Crazy stuff. I'm going to read a couple comments, and then I do have to jump. Pantrice won. Vientos has a single good game, then doesn't hit for the next week or two, and is extremely bad on defense. Plus, his attitude is putrid. DFA or trade for some single A reliever. Yeah, Pantrice, pretty similar to the cycle I was talking about before. I completely agree. I don't think you need to rage DFA him as frustrated as I am, as much as I just torched him for the last few minutes. There's no benefit, I guess, to that, especially when you're 8 games under 500. If they were competing, I guess you could make that case a little bit better. You hold on to him, you trade him. You're not going to really get anything for him, but I'd rather just get some kind of random lottery ticket and maybe get lucky rather than giving him up for literally nothing like you did with, when you non-tendered Justin Turner. Again, I don't think this is going to be a Justin Turner situation. I think Vientos, despite his age, is pretty cooked for me. But yeah, man, I think it's done for him here. Joe Saturn says those 2024 stats went to his head. I mean, maybe he's a confident guy, and you have to be confident to make it in not only in New York, but just as a professional athlete. The mindset, especially in baseball, but all sports, is so important. So I don't begrudge him for being confident. I just need you to be self-aware and accountable. And when you're, statistically at the very bottom in Major League Baseball in terms of value, in terms of a lot of offensive metrics, definitely in terms of defensive metrics, you can't be saying like, yeah, I'm giving myself props because I've just had a lot of bad luck. 2 years of bad luck. Like, come on, man. I'm not going to hear that. Last one from Boar Mets fan 86. Vientos is a platoon DH at best. Yeah, that's probably what his role will be post Mets. I just even that, I don't want to see it anymore. Like, he's certainly been better against left-handers this year. He's got a 734 OPS against lefties this year, 273. 2 of his 7 home runs are against them. Not a ton of plate appearances, 68. Significantly better than his numbers against righties. He has a 580 OPS against righties this year. He's saying under the Mendoza line against righties. Why they continue to trot him out there against them, that makes no sense to me. But even then, as a pure platoon hitter, you're just barely above average is not ideal. Another team can look at that and be like, yeah, we have a platoon situation at DH and we struggle to hit lefties and we could just use even league average to mildly above it. It makes sense for them. For me, I'm done with it. I think it's time to move on for him. And it's time to move on for the Mets. All right. That is going to do it for this abbreviated edition of the Midweek Show. Appreciate you guys for joining me, letting me vent a little bit about Mark Vientos. It's nothing personal, just we've reached that point. Mets get back into action starting on Friday in San Diego. Their last 3 games of the season that start at 9 p.m. or later, although Sunday is an afternoon game. So that's great for those of us who don't really want to stay up super late to watch this team anymore. I will be back on Sunday, as always, with my co-host, Andrew Claudio. Wait, will I be? Yeah. Oh, because the Knicks are off. I'm actually going to put one more comment up before I jump off from Ray. Who says, let's go Knicks. Again, wearing the Knicks cap. They are up 1-0 in the NBA Finals, which I cannot believe it. Another fantastic comeback on Wednesday night against the Spurs, just when it looked like, oh, maybe the haters were onto something. Nope. Because these New York Knicks, they're different. They're not the Mets. They're not last year's Knicks. They're not all the Knicks teams from before. Long way to go. I don't think this is going to be an easy series for them. But 3 wins away from a championship, man. And that is awesome. And definitely taking a lot of the sting out from our baseball team being bad. But me and Andrew will be back on Sunday. probably early evening since it's a little bit of a later afternoon start against the Padres. We will recap the entire week of baseball against the Mariners and San Diego. Until then, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. If you're watching on YouTube, please like, subscribe, all that fun stuff. If you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, any of the podcast apps, if you can give us a 5-star rating and review, leave a comment. It means the world to us. It helps us out tremendously. So we appreciate it. Hype this on YouTube, all that fun stuff. We'll be back on Sunday. Let's go Mets. And more importantly, let's go Knicks.